Hey everyone, welcome to Industry Headlines. Kevin Kaufman and Fred Weaver here with you, where we're going to look back at the last 7 days or so and deliver to you the headlines that jumped out to us in the real estate mortgage industry. So let's start with some of the headlines, Kevin. More disruption coming to the Phoenix, Arizona area of Culdesac, the United States' first car-free neighborhood. We'll talk about that in a minute. I noticed that I thought this article was interesting recently that I read a couple places. The Gen Z FICO score beats out millennials and Gen X. That's kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. And then Freddie Mac in the news recently. Loan limit increase coming, and also some expectations for what's to come in the mortgage and housing market in 2020 and beyond. So let's start with the disruption going on in Arizona, because this is that home of where all disruption starts, right?
Yeah. So Culdesac Tempe is going to be a 1,000-person development set to open up next fall, so 2020, here obviously in Tempe, Arizona, where our office is, and it's going to be the world's first non-car neighborhood.
They're calling it like post-car real. They're calling themselves post-car real estate developers. So
first of all, that's so stupid. That's such a bougie name.
Yeah,
post-car. It's not like postmodern. I hate words like that.
So I read multiple articles and sources on this because this made its way around the news. It was featured on Forbes. It's in a lot of different places, right? And so one of the founders actually started was with Opendoor. He left there in 2018 to become one of these real estate developers. So here's what's interesting. I think there's some interesting stuff to it. And then I think there's some like hype to it, right? Like some good marketing buzz to it. First of all, it's an apartment complex. Let's just start there. Okay. So the way that they come out and they talk about it like it's housing, it is housing, but it's apartments, not people that own, which leads me to say, okay, like maybe somebody can live anywhere for a year knowing that like they could go without a car for a year. I do think that we will get to a place in our society where we don't all own cars. I don't know that we're there yet. So I think they might be a little early here on the bell curve, if you will. But,
well, I mean, okay, so Tempe is that kind of city, though. This is it's perfect for Tempe.
It is.
Because of the light rail, because there is
students
a lot of
that go to Arizona State University.
There's a lot of walkable space in Tempe. Like not having a car isn't new to people that live in big cities. Like think like a New York City or San Francisco or other places with big downtowns. It's not a new concept. So I mean that happens a lot.
Yeah. So what's interesting is they've raised $10 million so far in venture capital. They've already broke ground on this project. They're set to open in fall of 2020. And we might be starting this episode over because Alexa is going off in the background. And I don't know anything that we had to say about Alexa. So this is quite interesting. But I can keep going if you'd like me to.
Just keep going, Fred.
We'll start over. We'll just keep going. Let's turn Alexa off. So built into this 1,000-person facility is a restaurant. There's going to be a grocery store within walking distance, gym, etc. I read one of the articles I read said that there's actually if you need furniture dropped off, you still need to get a vehicle into the complex. So there's some small roads, if you will, into the complex, but there's no parking on the complex. There's set aside designated space for Uber, Lyft, if you will, rideshare pickup. So it's just interesting. Like, I think it can work if you're a young 20s going to Arizona State or you work in Tempe. I think where Phoenix is not quite the same as some of the cities you mentioned earlier, New York City, Chicago, is that you can't get all around the Phoenix area without taking very expensive Uber and Lyft rides places.
Yep. So, maybe you can grab like a Bird scooter or a Lime scooter and go for a ride.
That was also mentioned in some of the stuff. Yeah. So biking, scooters, etc. But I don't know about 10 or 15 miles. But anyway, I think it's interesting. It's right near where you and I work, so I'll be interested to drive by it soon. It's 16 acres on Apache Road and Apache Boulevard, River Road.
You won't be parking there, but
I won't be parking. I'll be driving by. Exactly. All right, so moving on. Gen Z FICO score beats out millennials and Gen X, right? So this is the young Gen Z, for those of you that don't know, because I don't keep up with all this stuff. These are people that were born in 1995 or later.
Okay, so you don't qualify for that.
I don't qualify for that at all, no. But they have an average FICO score of 637, according to a report that was recently done by Lending Point.
Yeah, so 637, which, by the way, like whether that sounds high or low to you, just put it in perspective. That's the overall average is 634. So 3 points higher. That's actually pretty big when you consider how many people there are in all these different age groups.
Yeah, baby boomers, as an example, people born between 46 and 64 have a FICO average of 645, also according to Lending Point, right? And then it went on to say that I think it was 634 was the average for everybody, and millennials are at 632, born between 81 and 96. This whole like millennial, so I'm technically Gen X, which just seems weird to me because I was born in 80. So this whole thing is weird. I'm not into all that. But anyway, what I think is interesting about this article is just that the youngest generation has obviously the shortest credit history, but they're not getting into debt as quickly. And I think a lot of it is like if you grew up with parents who went through foreclosure or short sales or bankruptcies or had high credit card debt through 2007 through 2012, let's call it, I think you might be a little gun shy to just go out and spend a lot of money or not pay your bills because you watched your family, if you will, go through that stuff.
Yeah, think about that time, right? So if you're born in 95 or 96, you're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old during kind of like the worst time in history from a credit standpoint. Not history, but in recent history.
Recent history for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I could see that. Like a little, it's kind of like, you think about people who were born, you and I probably both had relatives who were either born in the Depression era or right after, and there was a very conservative approach from a lot of those folks, right? Very, very much like, hey, got to save every penny, don't overextend yourself to the extreme after a big deal like that. So that it's not too surprising.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. Interesting to see how some of those numbers play out over time. So Freddie Mac in the news a lot. I think probably the most notable thing for real estate mortgage professionals out there is that the loan limit has now increased for Freddie and Fannie to over $500,000. Like that just sounds big. I've been in real estate now for 15 years, but so to see that number grow and grow and grow, mind you, loan limits didn't actually move at all from 2006 to 2016. So there was a 10-year period where we saw no increase on conforming loan limits from Fannie and Freddie. And then all of a sudden over the last 3, 4, 5 years, you're seeing those loan limits have gone up every single year. 2019's level, if you don't know, is 484, 350. 2020's maximum level looks to be it's going to go at about $510,400.
That's crazy. I mean, that's a really significant jump.
It's not purchase price limit. This is loan limit, right?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. So if you got even just 10% down, you're really looking in that 550, 560, 570 range for purchase. That's a big jump. Interesting to see what's going on with that. Fannie and Freddie doing that. I'm curious, what is it that made them go, the 10-year period with no changes to now we've got a couple changes in again, and such a big jump too.
Yeah,
this is significant. It's almost $100,000 more than what it was just a few years ago.
It
actually is. It was 417 just a handful of years ago.
And so now we're over 510. Yep, in 2019.
Yeah,
2020.
So Freddie Mac also coming out this week talking about what to expect in the housing market in 2020 and kind of beyond. And I'll let you jump into that, but before we do, it was Fannie and Freddie. I think it was Freddie Mac's kind of finance folks that came out at the beginning of this year and said, hey, we're going to actually see interest rates go backwards. And they were on record long before everybody else was and before it even happened. And what happened? Interest rates started going back down when I think predominantly the mindset coming into 2019 was they were going to go up this year.
I feel like as a real estate professional, we've been expecting mortgage rates to just go up and up and up. So we found them a year ago, roughly 12 months ago. They were up. They had nearly about 5%, if you will, right? And then over, middle of this year and actually maybe second quarter of this year, and then again later in the year, we saw them come down back in the 3 to 4% range, right? Which is pretty crazy. What I think is interesting here is that Freddie Mac's actually predicting that they're going to stay around the levels that they're at right now through not just 2020, but also 2021. That's what caught me when I read this, is I was like, wow, they're actually going and predicting interest rates staying this low for 2 straight years, not just 1 year.
That's a pretty big statement. And if that is to be true, like if that actually plays out, then that keeps the housing market, that keeps pushing upwards, if you will, on housing market and refinances, things like that. So interesting times financially. I'm curious what this is going to mean for us, say in 2022 or 2023.
Be interesting to watch. I'll end on this. The Mortgage Bankers Association, sort of tying all this in, they came out and they've now showed that in 2019, like obviously the year's not over, but when they're, assuming things stay where they're at, they're forecasting that this will actually be the best year for refis since 2016, and the best year for purchase mortgages since 2006. So think about that for a minute, right? We're talking a 13-year period of time that interest rates have never been better for a home purchase. Like, so if I'm a real estate professional out there, I'm getting the news out that there hasn't been a better time to buy a home interest rate wise than there is right now over the last 13 years. And that, also, by the way, Fannie and Freddie have raised the conforming loan limit up to over $500,000. I'd be spreading that message.
2020, that's going to make that interesting. Low interest rates, higher conforming loan limits.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. Let's roll those dice.
Yeah, here we go into 2020. More predictions coming soon, I'm sure. Thanks for joining us for Industry Headlines. We'll see you back here next week.